Welcome back to Short Drive Deep Dive.
Okay, so today we're really diving deep, and I'm excited about this one. We're looking at something that, well, let's face it, it affects so many women, gastrointestinal and vaginal health, and how they're connected.
Yeah, definitely a crucial topic.
Absolutely. We've got a whole bunch of research here, a lot of it focusing on a product called Biotics.
Okay.
And this Biotics, it's actually a combo of two different formulations. You've
Yeah.
got Astartes and Clepias. So our mission today, if you will, is to break it all down, really understand the science behind these probiotics.
Mm.
How do they actually work? And what does the research tell us, about the potential benefits?
Well, a good starting point is to really appreciate the role of the microbiota,
Right.
both in the gut and in the vagina. These are these complex communities of microorganisms that live in those environments, and they're incredibly important for keeping those areas healthy. You can almost think of them as like a natural defense system.
Right. So it's like a delicate balance, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a delicate ecosystem, and if that balance gets disrupted, then that's when you start to see problems arise.
And that's where I guess the probiotics come in.
Yeah, exactly. The idea of probiotics that you're introducing beneficial bacteria
Okay.
to try and restore that balance.
Kind of like reinforcements. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, like bringing in the good guys to help fight off the bad guys.
Right. Exactly. But it's not just about like throwing any bacteria in there, is it?
No, absolutely not. These beneficial bacteria are very specific. They have to be able to survive in that environment, and they need to have specific properties that can help to improve the health of those areas. They do things like producing substances that make it difficult for harmful bacteria to grow.
Okay.
They can help to reduce inflammation, and they can even produce helpful compounds like short-chain fatty acids or SCFAs, which have a lot of positive effects throughout the body.
So those are the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
And I guess we should probably start with this Astartes, right?
Yeah.
That's the one that's specifically formulated for vaginal health.
Right.
So let's talk about that one first.
Okay.
What's in this Astartes? What makes it tick?
So Astarte is a blend of 4 specific lactobacillus strains.
Okay.
You have L. crispatus, L. rhamnosus, L. gasseri, and L. jensenii. And what's interesting about these strains is that they were originally isolated from healthy pregnant women, which suggests that they might play a really important role in maintaining a healthy vaginal environment, especially during pregnancy, but also, just in general.
So these are like the all-star team of vaginal health.
Exactly. And, we know that in healthy women who don't have any symptoms, lactobacillus species are usually the dominant bacteria in the vagina.
Yeah.
And studies have consistently shown that there's a link between their presence and a lower risk of all sorts of different urogenital problems. So it really points to the fact that a lactobacillus dominant vaginal environment is a key factor in keeping things healthy down there.
Makes sense. Now, I'm looking to the research, and it seems like one of the things that these lactobacillus strains, at least the ones in Astartes, are really good at is producing hydrogen peroxide.
Right.
Okay, now I'm thinking back to my first aid kit, and that sounds a little intense for a sensitive area.
Yeah, hydrogen peroxide has this kind of reputation as being a bit harsh.
Right.
But actually, in this context, it's a really good thing.
So what's it doing?
Well, think of it as like a natural, gentle antiseptic that these beneficial bacteria are releasing
Okay.
to help keep things clean and prevent harmful bacteria from setting up shop.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, for example, it can inhibit the growth of things like E. coli,
Okay.
which we know can cause urinary tract infections.
Right.
So by having these hydrogen peroxide producing lactobacillus present, you're essentially boosting your body's natural defenses.
I see. So it's like they're keeping the peace down there.
Exactly.
But then what happens if those lactobacillus levels start to drop? Because the info here mentions that a lack of these good bacteria can actually lead to imbalances.
Right.
So what's going on there?
So when the levels of those protective lactobacillus species, particularly L. crispatus, start to decline and you get an overgrowth of other types of bacteria, that's when you can get into trouble.
What kind of bacteria?
Well, one of the main culprits is a bacterium called Gardnerella vaginalis.
Okay.
And this shift in the balance of bacteria is often what leads to bacterial vaginosis, which is a really common condition.
Ah, okay.
And it can cause, uncomfortable symptoms like
Yeah.
unusual discharge and itching.
Right. Things that can be really annoying and disruptive.
Yeah.
And there's something here about how this shift can actually create a vicious cycle involving the pH level,
Hmm.
and also something called biofilms.
Yes.
Now, I'm not familiar with biofilms. Can you kind of break that down a little bit?
Yeah.
What are they and why are they a
Yeah.
problem?
So a biofilm is basically like a protective layer that bacteria can form. Okay.
It's like a shield.
Interesting.
It makes them much more resistant to things like antibiotics
Oh.
and to your body's own immune system.
So they're basically hiding out.
Yeah, exactly. And when these harmful bacteria are able to form biofilms, it makes it much harder to get rid of them,
Okay.
which is why you sometimes see these recurring infections.
Yeah.
And the shift in the vaginal pH that happens when you lose those lactobacillus can make it even easier for these biofilms to form.
I see. So it's like a double whammy, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back to Astartes itself, it seems like there was a lot of thought put into selecting the specific strains for this formulation.
Right.
It wasn't just random.
No, it was very deliberate.
So what went into choosing these particular lactobacillus strains?
Well, they actually started with a pool of 127 potential candidates,
Wow.
and they narrowed it down to these 4 based on a whole range of factors.
Okay.
So they looked at things like, safety, obviously.
Right. They wanted to make sure that the strains weren't resistant to antibiotics, that
Mm.
they didn't produce any harmful substances.
No.
They looked at their ability to produce not just hydrogen peroxide, but also lactic acid, which helps to maintain the correct pH level in the vagina. They also assessed their tolerance to things like bile and acid, which they would encounter in the digestive system. And crucially, they also looked at their ability to inhibit the growth of specific vaginal pathogens.
So it's a pretty rigorous process.
Yeah, very rigorous.
And the source here, it also talks about some clinical trials that have been done on Astartes,
Yes.
which is always good to see, real-world evidence. So there's one study here that was done in pregnant women who had a viral microbial imbalance. What exactly did they find in that study, and how could a vaginal probiotic potentially help in that kind of situation?
So in that study, they found that when Astartes was given in combination with fructoolisaccharides, which are prebiotics that can help to feed the beneficial bacteria, there were some really impressive improvements in the women's vaginal ecology. They saw an increase in the levels of beneficial bifidobacterium and lactobacillus species,
Okay.
and a decrease in those pathogenic species that we were talking about earlier. And what was really encouraging was that these changes in the microbiota were accompanied by improvements in their actual symptoms.
That's good.
Yeah. So things like vaginal discharge, itching, bloating, discomfort, even constipation, all of those things improved.
So a whole range of benefits, really.
Yeah, yeah. And they also saw a reduction in the incidence of things like placental insufficiency and fetal distress.
Really?
Yeah, which is obviously a major concern during pregnancy.
Absolutely.
So this suggests that having a healthy vaginal microbiota during pregnancy could be really important, not just for the mother's health, but also for the baby's health.
That's fascinating. So there's another study mentioned here that involved women who had bacterial vaginosis and were also taking antibiotics.
Right?
We know that antibiotics can sometimes disrupt the balance of bacteria, good and bad.
Right, yeah.
So how did Astarpe perform in that situation?
So, in this study, the women were given either a yogurt that contained Astarte or a placebo yogurt, along with a course of inotrinazole, which is an antibiotic that's often used to treat bacterial vaginosis.
Okay.
And the results were pretty remarkable.
In what way?
All of the women who had the Astarte yogurt saw a complete resolution of their bacterial vaginosis compared to only 35% of the women in the placebo group.
Oh, wow, that is a big difference.
Yeah.
That's quite a big difference.
And they also saw significant improvements in their symptoms, the discharge and the odor.
So it seems like it could be a really valuable tool for women who are taking antibiotics
Excellent.
to help restore that healthy vaginal environment. Now, there's also a study here about women who were dealing with infertility, which I wouldn't necessarily immediately connect with vaginal health.
Right.
So what were the researchers looking at in that study? What was the connection?
Well, this study was looking at the relationship between Astarte and a specific bacterium called Ureaplasma parvum. And this is a bacterium that's been linked to bacterial vaginosis, but also to an increased risk of preterm birth, which obviously can have implications for fertility. And what they found was that Astartea was associated with a reduction in the levels of this Ureaplasma parvum.
Interesting.
So this suggests that, maybe supporting a healthy vaginal microbiota could have benefits for reproductive health more broadly,
Huh.
which
Wow.
is something that researchers are still exploring.
That's a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's a pilot study that was done in postmenopausal women who had breast cancer and were undergoing chemotherapy.
Right.
Now, that's a group that can be particularly vulnerable to side effects.
Right.
What did they observe about their vaginal health in that study?
So in this study, they found that the women who received Astardia had significant improvements in their vaginal microbial balance, which was measured using something called the Nugent score.
Okay.
The Nugent score is a way of assessing the balance of bacteria in the vagina.
And so a good score means,
A lower Nugent score generally indicates a healthier, more lactobacillus-dominant environment.
okay.
So the women who were taking Astarte saw their Nugent score improve,
Okay.
while the women in the placebo group, their Nugent score actually got worse,
Oh.
which highlights the potential of Astarte to help support vaginal health, even in situations where it can be really challenged, like during chemotherapy.
And that's especially important because, I mean, these women are already going through so much.
Absolutely.
The last thing they need is to be dealing with additional discomfort or complications.
Exactly, and this suggests that Astarte could be a non-hormonal option for supporting their vaginal health during a really difficult time.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a good amount of evidence there supporting the benefits of Astarte for vaginal health. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the other component of Biodofema, which is Clepias.
Right.
And that one is focused on gastrointestinal health, gut health.
Exactly. So Clepias contains a specific strain of bacteria called Lactoplantibacillus plantarum L. flavi3, which we used to know as Lactobacillus plantarum.
Correct.
And this particular strain is known for being really good at surviving the journey through the digestive system.
Okay.
And it's been shown to help with common gut issues like bloating and discomfort.
So it's a tough little guy.
Yeah, it's a survivor.
It can handle the harsh conditions of the gut. Now, the source mentions that L. plantarum plays a role in maintaining something called the intestinal barrier
Right.
and also reducing something called intestinal permeability, which is also sometimes referred to as leaky gut. So can you explain what that means and why that's important for overall health?
Sure. So the intestinal barrier is basically the lining of your gut.
Okay.
And it's supposed to act as a barrier, as the name suggests, between the contents of your gut.
Things we eat?
Yeah, all the food you eat, the bacteria that live there,
Okay.
and the rest of your body.
So keeping things contained.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when the intestinal barrier becomes more permeable, we call that leaky gut. That means that things that shouldn't be crossing from the gut into the bloodstream are able to get through.
And that sounds like it could be problematic.
Yeah, it can lead to a whole host of problems,
Okay.
including inflammation, food sensitivities, even autoimmune disorders. And L. plantarum has been shown to help strengthen that intestinal barrier and reduce permeability.
How does it do that?
Well, it seems to work in a few ways.
Okay.
One way is by helping to strengthen the connections between the cells that line the gut.
So shoring up the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And it also seems to increase the production of those short-chain fatty acids that we talked about earlier.
Oh, right, the SCFAs.
Yeah,
And I remember you said those have benefits beyond just gut health.
right. They have a lot of systemic effects.
Okay.
They can help to modulate the immune system.
Interesting.
They can even affect things like your metabolism.
Oh.
So really important compounds.
And I also saw something in here that certain L. plantarum strains can actually upregulate genes involved in repairing the gut lining.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not just maintaining it, it's actually helping to fix it if there's damage.
Yeah, it's like they're little construction workers in there,
That's amazing.
helping to keep the gut wall in good shape.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And there's also this idea that L. plantarum can adhere to intestinal cells.
Right.
So it's not just floating around randomly.
No, it's actually able to attach itself to the lining of the gut.
Okay.
And that's important for a couple of reasons.
Okay, so why is it important?
First of all, it helps the bacteria to establish itself in the gut.
Makes sense.
So it can actually stick around and have a longer lasting effect.
Okay.
And secondly, it can actually help to prevent harmful bacteria from attaching to those same cells.
So it's like they're taking up all the parking spaces.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a competition for space.
And I guess the more good guys that are there, the less room there is for the bad guys.
Exactly.
So it seems like Clepias is working in a similar way to Astarte
Right.
by promoting a healthy balance of bacteria, just in a different location.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the research behind Clepias.
Sure.
There's a clinical trial mentioned here that focused on individuals with diarrhea-predominant bowel issues, which can be really debilitating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did they find in terms of symptom relief with Clepias?
So this was a large, well-designed study.
Okay.
It was randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled.
The gold standard.
Exactly. And they enrolled over 300 adults who had diarrhea-predominant IBS.
Okay.
And they gave them either one of two doses of Clepias or a placebo for 8 weeks.
Okay.
And they found that Clepias was really effective at reducing the severity and frequency of their symptoms.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Were there any particular symptoms that it seemed to be especially helpful for?
Yeah, they saw significant improvements in abdominal pain, bloating, and stool consistency. And importantly, they also saw improvements in their quality of life, which is a really important measure when we're talking about IBS.
Absolutely. It's not just about the physical symptoms.
Yeah.
It's also about how it impacts your daily life.
Right, exactly.
So it seems like Clepias, it could be a valuable option for people who are struggling with those types of bowel
Oh,
issues.
definitely.
So let's bring it all together now. We've got Biotics, which combines both Astardi and Clepias.
Right.
What's the rationale behind this combined approach? Why target both vaginal and gut health in one product?
Well, as we learn more and more about the microbiota, we're starting to understand that the gut and the vagina are much more interconnected than we previously thought.
Interesting.
They both rely on a delicate balance of bacteria.
Okay.
And if that balance gets disrupted in one area, it can often affect the other.
Makes sense.
So, it's not unusual for women who are experiencing gut issues to also have vaginal issues, or vice versa.
Right.
And by targeting both areas simultaneously, Biotics aims to provide more comprehensive support for women's overall health and well-being.
So it's like a two-pronged approach.
Exactly, yeah.
And the mechanism of action for both formulations seems to be pretty similar, right?
Right.
Modifying the local environment to support the growth of beneficial bacteria, reducing inflammation, and increasing the production of those helpful short-chain fatty acids.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about promoting a healthy, balanced ecosystem in both the gut and the vagina.
So for someone listening who's thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, I might want to give this a try.
Okay.
What's the recommendation? How is Biotics typically used?
So the typical recommendation is 1 capsule per day,
Okay.
taken as a dietary supplement.
Okay.
But as always, it's important to talk to your doctor
Right.
to make sure it's right for you and to discuss any specific concerns you might have.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up, we've really delved into the science behind Biotics.
Yeah.
We've looked at the specific lactobacillus strains in Astartia and how they work to support vaginal health.
Right.
We've discussed the L. plantarum strain in Clepias and its benefits for gut health.
Right.
And the clinical trials we've looked at really suggest that these formulations have the potential to make a positive impact on women's health, by helping to restore a healthy balance of bacteria in both the gut and the vagina.
Definitely. And it really just goes to show how incredibly important the microbiota is for our overall health.
Absolutely. And, it makes you think, what other aspects of our health might be more influenced by these microbes than we currently realize?
Right.
It's a fascinating area of research.
It is.
And on that note, here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Given this intricate connection between our microbial inhabitants and our well-being, what steps can you take to support a healthy internal ecosystem?
It's definitely something to ponder.
Yeah, something to ponder. Of course, always consult with your medical professional to make sure this is right for you, and always do your own deep dive independent research.